Italian Studies program, which I'm the coordinator, and also the World Languages and Cultures Department for funding this wonderful opportunity. I'll do a little bit of my stuff and mention, of course, if you didn't already know, we have an Italian Studies program. A lot of you are in Italian classes, and where could that lead you? That is where, for instance, we have courses offered in the summer. We have them here. We have them in Sorrento, Italy. We have them in Florence, so there's a lot of study abroad opportunities as well as Italian class opportunities here. And at the end of the month, we'll hear from Dr. Varini about when she, an Elon faculty member, took students to Florence and just how important it is to study abroad, learn other languages, learn other cultures, and even music, as we can see here this evening. You can always contact me since I'm the coordinator. And then, of course, since it is indoors, we have our masks, which is great, fantastic. The musicians are distant such that we're okay there, too. So I'll present first Michaela Muzolino, who is an internationally recognized Sicilian-American singer. The granddaughter of Sicilians immigrated to America, she has rediscovered her own cultural roots through the study and reinterpretation of the folk songs of Sicily and southern Italy. And Larry Vellani is also here with us, who is a semi-retired professional administrator, fundraiser, teacher scholar, and performing artist who has worked in private and public organization, performed on theater and concert stages, and taught at institutions in the Midwest and Southeast for 40 years.
Incluso di?
What's that?
Incluso di?
Elon. From 94 to 2004, that was getting to the good part. Right? He was here, and then from 2002 to 2010, he served in the political science and department in the development office at Elon. So we're glad to have y'all. Very briefly, the duo Musolino voice and Sicilian frame drum and Vellani on guitar will perform for us world music tethered to Sicilian traditions, but open to contemporary texture drawn from jazz and experimental. The repertoire we'll see or hear tonight spans from songs about Sicilian mariners to original compositions inspired by the folklore and mythology of Sicily. How exciting! How exciting!
Well, the way you say it, it's exciting.
Oh, well, they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it. And on that note, I can say, since Michaela was here a couple years ago with Fabio Turchetti, I would say to you, be prepared to be carried away, okay? And to just let this music and language touch you, because that's what it did to me. I didn't expect it to happen like it did, but it did. And then finally, we do have accompanying them Irina Tkachenko, who was born and raised in Kiev, Ukraine, now resides in Fall River with the accordion and mandolin. We have Jody McCall, born in Biloxi, Mississippi, coming of age in Durham, North Carolina, and now residing in Mebane. And we have Peggy Boswell, who was born and raised in Burlington, North Carolina, coming of age in Johnson City, Tennessee, and now residing in Mebane. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you for being here.
La facilità è stata sì,
on the mic. We're not just here to give you a concert of beautiful Sicilian music, traditional Sicilian music. We're going to throw some learning at you, because music is a beautiful way to understand the history of a people, but it's also a way to understand the soul of a people. So while you're learning a language, while you're learning Italian language, you're also learning the culture, am I correct?
Si.
You're learning... So music is that kind of study. So from the history of the music, from the stories behind the songs, we can understand how people used to think, how people used to live, how they used to love, how they used to go to war, how they used to go to work. And that's what you'll hear today from all these songs. So what I started out with was just a nursery rhyme, a filastrocca. So why do you think grown-ups would sing a nursery rhyme? And you can call out and answer. You can call. I guess you have to put your hand up if you want to. But why do you think a grown-up would sing a nursery rhyme? No? Ideas?
A sinistra.
Maybe because it was like well known.
Yeah, it was well known. Did you say it could connect people? Is that what you said? Yes, that's a beautiful reason. But once upon a time, everybody sang. We all sang. Our daily lives had a soundtrack. So people sang when they went to work. They sang when they played. They sang when they were worshiping. They sang for every moment of their life. Song did not just belong to the realm of the musicians. And we were all connected, and music was a good way to connect. It's a very good point. So a nursery rhyme, even though it's something that you learn when you're a child, it could stay with you as an adult, and it could be a song that you sang while you're working. It could be a song that you sang in celebration, because it's something that's in your memory bank and it's familiar. But songs also were a means of preserving your history, because songs talked about daily life, the subject of songs. Songs were also a means of bringing the sacred into the realm of everyday life. People may not have been able to read, so they might not have been able to read the stories of the saints, but they could keep these stories ever in front of them by the music that they play. This next song I'm going to play for you, and it's just an a cappella song. It tells the story of the Holy Family, and it tells it in a way that it takes like a vignette out of the daily life of the Holy Family, and it tells it in a way that it makes the sacred very much part of daily life. The saints in this telling of this vignette are like we are. They're human like us. They're not far away. They're not hard to reach. They're very human like us. But this comes from a child's nursery rhyme, and it comes from one of those little songs that you would probably teach a child as they're learning how to toddle. So this filtered in through the culture, but it also gives an idea of how people related to the saints. It's called Tiritera di Bagheria. It comes from Bagheria, outside of Palermo. And Tiritera just means rhyming, alliteration. So it's a story. Baby Jesus is playing, and Mary says, you behave now. Your daddy's going to come home. Your very old father is going to come home. We used to think St. Joseph was an old man. And he's going to bring you little presents now. Tiritera di Bagheria. reason I play the drum the way I do with that dragging percussion on it is because the woman who actually documented that song, her name was Musolino, she's a famous Sicilian folk singer. When she learned that song from a very old woman in Bagheria, there was a little boy, or the woman's grandson, took a rock, and he was beating at the rhythm with a rock during that song. So this happened probably around the 1950s. So even though we were in modern times, people were still making music the way they did in olden times. And we know that we talked about music is also a way to pass the time when you work. I said people sang when they worked. So this next song comes from a work tradition of the carrettieri. And the carrettieri were the men who would drive wagons across Sicily. The way we have truckers today, that you see them on the highways. They used to drive these wagons back and forth across Sicily, but they had to go all day and all night. They couldn't just stop and rest. So at night, in order to pass the time, in order to stay awake, in order to stave off fear and tiredness, they would sing. And they came up with a style of singing that was very particular to what they did, and they became so good at this way of singing that they actually used to have competitions among themselves. When they weren't working, they would all gather together, and they would see who was the best singer. So this song is called Amuri Amuri, means love. It's a love song. You're going to hear a lot of love songs there. We're going to talk about that too. It's a love song. And it's in the voice of a woman. And she's lamenting because her lover is far away. And she said, oh, you're so far away. And she asks him, who is making your bed tonight? Why do you think she would ask him that? Because up until not that very long ago, until the late 20th century, it was a woman's job to prepare the beds in the house at night for everybody. She had to turn down the beds for everybody. That was her role. So her lover's far away. And she said, I wonder who's making your bed tonight. So just in case, to be sure, she curses the both of them. Amuri, amuri. And it's a very bare song. You're not going to hear a lot of instrumentation on this, because I want you to understand that when these songs were sang, it was at night. All you ever heard was the sound of maybe horses' hooves along the road, not even pavement. They didn't have pavement then, it was dirt roads. And maybe the bells on the horses. Amuri, amuri. Amuri, amuri. Amuri, amuri. Quanto si lontano, utile pensa nulla tu la sera. Utile pensa di lo pensa manu. Ma Pedro chi leva la mattina. Oddio, se lo portassero sti manu, oppure a mente pina seratina. La mattina quando ogni spieghiamo luce la rosa si spambina. La mattina idea of this separation, a lover at a distance. We tend to see that a lot in love songs from Sicily. We also have a lot of love songs. I do enjoy singing love songs, but that's not the reason why my repertoire is so love song heavy. There was a really important reason why love songs were so prevalent. The next song I'm going to sing is actually a courtship song. And the reason that courtship has so many songs associated with it is because courtship was a very strong tradition. We have this idea, and has anybody seen like in a movie or read a book where you have this, a woman comes out on the balcony and the man is underneath and he's serenading her? Are you familiar with that? That's not just a device for entertainment. That was an actual tradition. That was a means to bring the men and the women together because we could not communicate with each other the way, as we have our professors here sitting next to each other, that was not permitted. As you're sitting next to a boy, if he wasn't related to you or you weren't married to him, you couldn't do that in public. We can, I don't care today, you do whatever you want. But that's how strict society was. So we had this ritual of courtship. But courtship has an even more important reason in the history, especially in Sicily. Courtship, and I'm just gonna throw this out. Would anybody guess why courtship was so important? If you want to raise your skill, take a flying stab at it. You're hovering right over the mark there. Family is very important. It was survival. Because Sicily, in a strategic location in the Mediterranean, was constantly invaded. And this isn't just a recent phenomenon with invasions. We know even today that there's human trafficking happening all throughout Sicily, right? Because it's strategically located in the Mediterranean. It's a jumping off point. But since antiquity, there was invasions. Has anybody here been to Sicily? Any of you students, have you been there yet? Have you gone to any of the amphitheaters? Have you seen any of the old ancient ruins, the amphitheaters? What's the one thing they'll have in common? Their location? There's something about their location, the way they're positioned, they all have it in common. The backdrop.
Aren't they all facing the same way? Like
The sea is always behind them. So when if this were an amphitheater in Sicily and you're sitting there in the audience, right? They're all at the ocean, right? They're all at the sea. There's a reason for that. Even in their moments of leisure, they had to watch to make sure they weren't being invaded. These people could never rest for one moment. And that is something that has been carried on for generations. And Sicily was constantly, again, invasions kept up into modern times. And it wasn't just, pirates are coming to the coast. This was, your life would change overnight. You didn't know who was going to be controlling you, didn't know who was going to be governing, you didn't know who was going to be fighting you. There was one constant, and that's what this young lady mentioned, your family. Your family was the only constant that you had. So it was important that your children had a good match, so your family could continue, so you could survive. Your family would survive, and as part of that survival was your survival, the survival of your children. So from this necessity, traditions arose, and a format arose for finding out the person. They had to check him out first. Before a girl could give a guy allow him to have his attention, they had to check out his family. They had to check him out. Was he a good match for them? And from this necessity, traditions arose, and one of them is courtship. So this next song is a courtship song, and the name of the song is called Ma vieni a faccia, which means just come out here, please. And he's standing out there in the rain and the cold weather, and he's saying, please come out and show yourself on the balcony. And sometimes all it took was the young lady was allowed, her family allowed her to go out on the balcony, and then the man knew that they could proceed with this ritual, and eventually the families could connect and survive. So,
Ma viene a faccia, oh viene a viri, come ca, sogno itata. arilu fridru, arilani, rilu viento, arimara. Magala presto, oh figliascini, fammi un poco a riparare. Giallo lampo, oh figliascini, non mi poti più a ripari. Ma cala presto, oh figliascini, fammi un po' a riparare. E vi racconto ogni me penni, passo, 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 arona, arona, ma viene a faccia, oh viene a viri, come ca, sogno itata. Como ca, sogno itata.
And I just want to say a quick thank you to the musicians I have here with me, because this stuff has all just been thrown at them, and this set list was just thrown at them, and I'm kind of hopping around, and I think they're doing a great job, so thank you.
Thank you. Grazie Michaela. Bravissima.
So we're talking about love songs, okay? Here's another love song for you. Veneste caro ci vermono luce, sine canena mia stace malata. That's a song that comes from Naples. It was written and arranged by Vincenzo Bellini, a classical composer. Okay? But that song actually dates back before that. That song has traces, it has elements of songs that come from the Baroque. And this was very typical of classical composers. They were constantly borrowing. I believe we call it sampling today, right? We sample in a rap song, right? It's the same thing. And a lot of these composers, if they were not Italian, they came to Italy when they made the Grand Tour. They went through Europe. That was to be a well-educated person at one time. You had to travel through Italy, especially travel through Europe, and see all these different European countries and see the southern parts of these countries as well. So they were constantly borrowing from the popular tradition. And folk music in Italy, it's called musica popolare. Not pop music, not popular music, but musica popolare, that we call it folk music here. So they were constantly borrowing from this tradition. And when these traditions became standardized, as we could say, or arranged, or on sheet music, or recorded, they sometimes would filter back to the folk. So there's this great cycle of music going back and forth between high art and what we call low art. And it's a wonderful cycle that continued for centuries. Even if you're musicians and you study Franz Liszt wrote tarantellas, and he lifted them, sampled them right from southern Italy, from Naples and Sicily. So, Feneste Calucina It was a Neapolitan song. It was written in the 19th century. And into the 20th century, it was a song that was recorded by many, many famous artists, famous opera singers. It's found its way into the soundtrack of many popular films. But this is associated with the Sicilian song. So remember, it goes back before Bellini even wrote the song. Remember, there were elements of this melody in Naples. So how would it get from Naples to Sicily? And we're going to use music to trace this history. So when you start studying the language, right, you have all these other wonderful subjects that come through. There used to be a great cross-migration between Naples, Puglia, and Sicily. People constantly migrate. Same reasons we migrate today, economic, especially agrarian society, because they followed the harvest. So they would go back and forth between different regions. But there is another reason that Naples and Sicily shared culture. And I know some of you must know this, so you take a guess at this one. Teachers don't count and the band doesn't count, because I know the band knows this too.
Ask the question one more time.
Why would Sicily and Naples share a culture? Why would, even though there's so much different between Naples and Sicily, there are elements that are similar.
Trade.
Trade is a good reason, and we're going to cover that in another song. But what I'm aiming for, and the trade involved, this reflects the trade. Sicily and Naples, right? They used to be part of they are in the same country today, but they used to be part of the same kingdom, il Regno delle Due Sicilie, the kingdom of the two Sicilies. Naples was the capital. Naples was a center of music. It still is to this day. Naples has, for centuries, had amazing conservatories. It leads the world in music. That's why so many amazing songs, beautiful, popular songs came from Naples. But again, add that to the cross-migration. Add it that this was a kingdom. It was a self-contained country from Naples all the way down to Sicily, the Mezzogiorno. And you have this movement of traditions back and forth. So the song evolved through the centuries, and it became a popular song that added the melody. We often take the melody from a tradition in one region and add it to a text from another region. And it became this song that you're going to hear now. It's called Mi voto e mi rivolto. And it is a love song. We know why they love love songs so much. And it's about that kind of love that makes you toss and turn, that you cannot rest. Mi voto e mi rivolto.
Mi voto e mi rivoto sospirando, passo le notti interi senza sonno, e li pedrezità io contemplando, li passo di la notte sino a giorno. Pittia un po' tu ora, chiudo dormire, ascino navicchio, stabilito cuore. Tu sai quando io dai all'assari, quando la vita mia finisce morire.
2017, a Sicilian DJ came to me and said, I want you to sing that song over a house mix. And we did. We have a house mix. I'll give you the link if you want one of these. And then a year, it was up for Grammy consideration. We didn't get anything. We didn't get the nomination. And then a year later, we did it again in English. So this song is still evolving, and now it's got an English verse at the end. And it also exists somewhere in the ether and in discos in Italy with a house mix. So a song that started in the Baroque is now a disco song. So, we've been talking about work songs, and I mentioned to you, you could learn about the soul of a people from their music. So this next song comes from my favorite tradition out of the Sicilian music, and that's the tradition of the songs about the sea. And I love those songs. They're the most beautiful to me, they're the most entertaining. But this is very special. This isn't a song from the mariners. This is a song that is in the voice of the wives of the mariners, and it's called Canto delle donne di marinai di Trapoli, the song of the wives of the fishermen from Trapoli. Sometimes also called a femminisca, which means the woman's song. And this was a song, it's a traditional song from Sicily. It was first documented by the great Alberto Ferrara. And if you ever have a chance, please look him up and look up what he documented. And what's really interesting, even if you're not interested in music, if you're interested in music, definitely try to look up the Corpus Ferrara. But even if you're not interested in music, if you're a student of Italian, read what he wrote about each of the songs that he documented. It's fascinating because it's a great journey through anthropology. It's a great journey through sociology to understand what was going on in Sicily in that time, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we have this song, and it's really a prayer, and it's in the voice of the woman, and they say, Dear Lord, my lover is at sea. Please give him masts of gold and jibs of silver. And then they say to the Madonna, please, you have to grant this prayer for me. But what's special about this, for several reasons, it comes from a tradition that the women had in Sicily that goes back to antiquity. When the men would go out to sea, we never knew, really couldn't predict the weather very well. We didn't have the instruments that we have today, so weather can change very rapidly at sea, yes? So if the men could not get back to shore, if a storm came and the men could not get back to shore, the women were aware of this. They would go down to lungo lo scoglio, they go to the shore, along the edge of the water, in a group, and collectively they would wail and cry and chant. And it was the sound of their voices that would act like a beacon, so the men could get their fishing boats back home through the fog and the storm. They might not have had lighthouses, but they had the voices of the women. And from that tradition arose this beautiful song. And when we read in the Corpus Ferrara his notes, Alberto Ferrara's notes about this, he was very touched by the tenderness, the emotions that are expressed in this song, because there's a lot of longing, there's talk about separation, there's this desire for only good for the man that they love. But he said it's a contrast, it's a very stark contrast with the harshness, the reality of the lives these people lived. Because these men went out every day on these little rickety boats, and they never knew day to day if they would come home. The wives also never knew every morning when the men went out to sea. Remember, fishermen were out to sea at like 4 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. They never knew if their husbands would come home that day. And again, this was the harsh reality of that these people had to live every single day. So, Canto delle donne di marinai. And with this, we go to the sea.
possono arrivarmi salvamente. Non arriva nada, chama e a pedir tudo se parou quando de lá passado Mari, Mari.
Because we're taking this opportunity to use music as a historical journey, anthropological journey, I wanted you to hear this next song, because this song comes from a very specific time in history. It comes from the year 1848. Do any of you folks have an idea what was happening in Europe in 1848? And don't be timid. When you have no reason to be timid when I answer questions. I'm not grading you, so don't worry about it. I'm not grading, and they can't see you either, so they're in the front row, so don't worry about it. So, in 1848, revolution was breaking out all throughout Europe. Okay? But it started in Sicily, in Palermo, believe it or not. And it started with something called the bread uprising. Quite simply, the peasants, the contadini, the farmers, had no food. Times were tough. And they said, we just want bread. So they revolted. And this is a song that was written around that time by someone called Salvatore Adelfio. And it's a song, it's a poem that was written about a donkey. Donkey's a metaphor. It's not trying to be comedic, it's a metaphor. And I sing this song in concert, and we have some Sicilians in the audience, yes? Do you have any old timers in your family? Like aunts and uncles and grandparents? Like, do they ever talk about songs about a donkey? Sicilians, there's songs about donkeys that Sicilians they get really happy about. And there's usually somebody in the band that brays like a donkey. So when I start talking about the donkey song, they'll get excited. I'm like, it's not that kind of donkey song. It's a different kind of donkey song. So why are it's a time of uprisal for the peasants. People are starving. Why would we use a donkey? Donkey was a metaphor. The donkey was crucial for survival. Again, these people were just surviving, okay? We have all kinds of, like the outrage we have and the cancel culture we have. That's the sign of a society that has a lot of free time. Well, back then, people were just too busy surviving. That's what they had to focus on. So if you had a donkey, you could farm, you could get water, okay? And a donkey could do back-breaking work without for days without eating, it could go without water for days, and it was strong. So a donkey was important to your family for survival. So this idea of the donkey was a metaphor for the peasant. Because if we don't have farmers growing food, what do we have? Think about it. And the farmers worked days without eating, days without water, and they did backbreaking work. So that donkey is a metaphor here for the people that were revolting. So the donkey's carrying bread for the boss, the patron. And he said, please give me a crust of bread to eat because I'm starving. And the boss says to him, why should I feed you? You're just a donkey. And even if I did give you a crust of bread, you'd still be starving. So the donkey gets upset, and he throws himself down on the ground, and he refuses to work. So consider it like a strike. Right? He says, I'm not going to work anymore. And he cries out, and he says, Usatio uncriri alludium. And that's a very old Sicilian saying. It means, the man who has enough to eat never understands the one who is starving. Usatio. Is actually a contemporary song. It was written probably around 1970s, early 80s by someone named Pino Veneziano. And Pino Veneziano was a great, we call him an anthropologist. He wasn't really an official anthropologist. He was a great observer of human condition. And it's based around a Sicilian expression, which is Nenti saccio, nenti viti. Nenti viti e io non c'era. Vi si c'era, dormia. E kudurmi nenti vidi. Which means, I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. I wasn't there. If I was there, I was sleeping. And the one who goes to sleep doesn't know anything. The reason why we bring this up is because, as I said, remember, a song can express what is going on in the mind of the people. It's a very old way of behaving that the Sicilians had. They didn't see it, so this can explain sometime why we have the crime scene that we do in Sicily. So this is called La Mafia non esiste. And we say, even though that judges get killed and assassinated and airplanes just seem to fall out of the sky, yes, there is really nothing as the mafia, because I didn't see anything. Di such an NTVD non c'era, e se c'era io dormia, e tu dormi in NTVD, un aeroplano che scoppiava, un giornalista scompariu, procuratori che ammazzarono, e non rosinarono now. Però la mafia non esiste, questa è tutta fantasia. No, la mafia non esiste, ora esiste la mafia. Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai. A Palermo Fuscaioni, a Milano Calabresi, non dovete, non c'era, e se c'era già mia. Ma se c'è qualcuno che viri e non vuole raccontare, non dovete, non c'era, e se no se la rubara. Però la mafia non esiste, questa è tutta fantasia. Oh, la mafia non esiste, ora esiste la mafia. Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai, che guai! Ai 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 ai. We're getting just to the end of our journey. We have about 2 more songs we're going to squeeze in. Next song is in honor of a feast day, November 2nd. Does your family, the little Sicilian girl with the pretty round face, I have a beautiful daughter with a pretty round face, that's why, and there's Sicilian songs about that, the girl with the pretty round face. Does your family celebrate November 2nd?
Yes.
Tutti morti.
Yes.
Do they do anything special? What do you do?
That's actually my mom's and my brother's birthday.
Is it really?
It's kind of like a whole
Auguri.
celebration.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, yeah.
Oh, November 2nd is, we have an All Souls Day, an All Saints Day, and it's All Souls Day, November 2nd. And it's a day when we honor our deceased loved ones, our deceased relatives. Now think about this. When I do this song at concerts, all the people in the audience, all the Spaniards get really excited because they celebrate that day too. So why would we celebrate that day in Sicily? Because Sicily was under Spanish occupation for 500 years. So if you speak Sicilian, there are some words and phrases that sound very Spanish. And we have a lot of culture from the Spaniards. They were in control for 500 years, so those cultures mixed and mingled. So on that day, something that happens is in Palermo, you would go to the cemetery with your family, you would have a picnic, either at the cemetery in the crypt, the family crypt, with your dead loved ones. And I thought about that, and I said, what would it be like to be at that party? And that's what this song is about.
Panorama dei nostri santi, tra le grida di piccini ci ospitiamo nei nostri morti, appunto la tavola piccini ci festeggiamo nei nostri santi, se noi oltre armi santi, si ti appresa noi altri. 1, 2, 3, su tamburo e chitarra facciamo una sfondata. Mangiamo canzonetti alla tavola rimorti. Armi santi.
You mentioned trade before, and I said we talk about that. I want to finish with one last song. It's the Song of the Mariners. We're going to do something. It's not going to go out of this room. It's going to be like Las Vegas for a few minutes. Here. Okay, because I would like you to sing with me, and I don't expect you to sing with the song. Okay, so we didn't see anything. Nenti saccio, nenti vite, io non c'ero. Okay, I didn't see anything. But this next song is a song of the Coral Fisherman. Okay, and what happened in the mid 1800s? Coral beds were discovered in Sicily, around Sciacca, which is on the southern part of Sicily. And it created an industry. It created a little economic boom. But they needed to be able to fish this coral. Now, if any of you are Neapolitan, Naples has a beautiful tradition of coral art and jewelry. And there are a lot of families that have been in the business of making coral jewelry for hundreds of years, because outside of Naples, on the coast or along Naples and Campania, there are tremendous coral beds. So the Sicilians needed help. The Neapolitan fishermen went down to Sicily, and they worked with fishing boats side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the Sicilians. So what happened? They had to communicate. Remember, they spoke 2 different languages. Neapolitans spoke Neapolitan, Sicilians spoke Sicilian. They're very different. And what would happen is the languages started to mix and mingle, and the sailors even, the fishermen started to actually come up with their own language. We call it a gergo, G-E-R-G-O, gergo, right? They created, God bless you, they created their own kind of lingo. So this song is a mix of Sicilian and Neapolitan. It's just a fun song, we can sing it together. It's a song that they would sing on the fishing boats when they were pulling up the nets. So what it is, it's a call and answer. So I would call out to you, I would say something like, Oe Nico, and you would call back to me, Oe Nico. And then I would call out, Oe Nira, and you would answer back, Oe Nira. And we go back and forth. And I have a wonderful crew of sailors behind me, so they're going to help us too. And then I would call out things like, A-I-C-E-C-A, A-I-C-E-C-A, Aut-a-cat-a-out. I'm making these noise because we're pulling in the nets, right? We got to exert ourselves. And then at one point I'm going to yell out at you, "E tira!
E tira!"
Now, you Italian students should be able to answer. What am I asking you to do? Pull. They'll all get an A for that. There you go. There you go. I'm an easy grader. You wish you were my teacher. All right. So let's see how. And I'm going to drum. I'm going to give you you can insist. I'm going to give you Neapolitan rhythm. Let's see where you are. How's that? Oh. you want to? What's wrong with these kids? They're supposed to be like, you know, rebels. We were not like you in college, trust me on that one. Different era. But thank you so much for coming. Any questions? I'm here for a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. You can find me on the internet, MichaelaMuzolino.com. I got CDs, you can download music. I know you guys love downloads, but you can't own it, so buy records instead. Trust me on that. Thank you to the faculty for having me. Thank you so much, Brandon, for setting this up. Thank you to Larry for helping in a pinch here. And thank you to Mike and Sean, he disappeared, but we had great sound guys today.
Amen.
And thank you to, and you know what, you're making me so happy that you're studying Italian language and culture, because I was an Italian language major, so be careful, because this could be you in 20 years.
Yeah. What?
Dormi mentre fai l'amore. Dormi mentre fai l'amore.
Thank you so much. They're great.
Yeah.